All right. Good afternoon, New Bedford and Greater New Bedford area. We're on Friday, hitting the end of the week, ready for the weekend. It's a little cold today. We have an interview today with Mayor Mitchell. We want to talk to him because we had a couple of COVID-19 spikes, which is something that, short term to worry about, but long term, we think it's something that's just a spike, a little bump in the road, hopefully on the end of this COVID crisis that we're in. If you go back to like May, the numbers were astronomical. Today, they're a lot lower, but these spikes do happen. So welcome, Mayor Mitchell. How are you doing at City Hall?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we had two spikes, and it forced Massachusetts, the governor of Massachusetts, Baker, to add New Bedford to the high risk. So there was 7, now there's 13. New Bedford got added. Every Saturday, they kind of go through the numbers and add cities, and that usually indicates that the cities have to do certain things. But if we could talk about the two spikes. So the first one was at the nursing home.
Yeah, I think, so maybe just step back a second just to, offer up where things are and where we think they're going. We were at roughly 4 or 5 cases a day for a while. And, that's, just to give people a sense of it, it's, that's a lot lower than what it was when we were in the first surge, right? We had back in April, we were averaging over 50 a day. We had one day where we had 94 cases. So a big difference between then and now. So we've gone in the last couple of weeks from 5 to about 10. Most of that jump is attributable to 2 clusters that we've identified and that we're dealing with. So the first cluster is was one at the Savoy nursing home on County Street. So there we had a staff member who came into work, hadn't been tested, was positive, spread it to a number of patients. And so from that cluster, it looks like it's about 24 patients. We just, as of today, just had a couple of more that were added to that group. Just about all of those who were infected, both patients and staff, were New Bedford residents. I think 2 weren't, but the rest were. So that obviously adds to the numbers. But more importantly, we think that we have that cluster contained pretty well. There are still some people being tested, so some more positive tests might hit the scoreboard. But by and large, you have a population there that's contained, and so we don't expect it to go further than that. As we know with nursing homes, if the staff aren't moving from place to place, you don't expect nursing home clusters when they happen to become much larger clusters. The real risk with nursing homes is that you have a vulnerable population that is susceptible to really grave illness, and that's what we worry about primarily with them. The other cluster was very different. That was in a storefront church on Acushnet Avenue in the North End. In that instance, we had a person who returned from, I believe it was Puerto Rico, who hadn't quarantined and who wasn't tested before he went to a Sunday service there. It's a fairly confined space. There's really some indications that there wasn't appropriate social distancing going on there and mask wearing, and quickly a number of people were infected. I know the health department took a real close look at it. I think they were very troubled by what they felt was a lack of cooperation on the part of the church. And that's why fines were issued in that case, because as it turns out, we had a big cluster there where over 40 people were infected, and there still might be some more that come in the door. But we also had, when those things happen, we need information really quickly. And so that requires people in positions of authority and where the outbreaks might occur to cooperate, to turn over as much information, including contact information, as quickly as possible. And that wasn't happening there. And so the health department issued some fines as a result. It's a long, I think the upshot of all this, Mike, is that these outbreaks can happen without too much trouble. I mean, they can happen if people aren't practicing. They're not operating by the rules in place. In this case, out-of-state travel. and mask wearing and social distancing. And, if there isn't, a swift reaction by, the made possible by the turning over of information, then the disease can spread before we can get a handle on it. So I think we've made a lot of progress there. It's not to say that there won't be some more people who come in and test positive. I would be surprised if there were none. But I do think we have an understanding of what happened there. But it does complicate things. We've gotten calls from people who've said, are you closing schools down as a result of this? Are you taking other measures? And the answer is no. Even though we're in the red category as a result of these clusters, other closures are not mandated. What we do is we try to look at all the circumstances, and I think if we hadn't identified where these clusters were coming from, if we're still searching around and just saw this huge spike in cases, we'd say, we better take some precautions. But I do feel confident that we're running this to ground. But again, it can't be emphasized enough. It's these little things that people have been asked to do really matter. And New Bedford has done very well so far throughout all this. Our residents have been fantastic and responsible and mature. And we just need to continue to do that as hopefully we lead to a more permanent solution, whether that's a vaccine or improved therapies or some combination of the two.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating that like Bristol County, I was looking yesterday, it has 30 cases. I feel like we've been stuck at this final last remnants of COVID, but all it takes is, if you talk to scientists from Fauci to all the way down to the local level, if everyone washed their hands, wore a mask, social distance, quarantine when they traveled, this would be eradicated. But 99% of a city or 99.9% of a city can do everything right. It just takes that small amount. So I think it's what you're saying is extremely important, that people we can get past this final push in 2 weeks if we would just follow the basic guidelines that the CDC has laid out.
Yeah, and it's stuff as simple as mask wearing. I mean, we've seen it work in other countries. I mean, South Korea is one of them. You spent a lot of time in South Korea. That's a country where they really didn't shut things down all that much. People just started wearing masks, and like everybody wore a mask. And they've largely have it under control, and their economy is operating. And we need to be doing more of that here. I do think that most of the places in the Northeast do it pretty well. We do it pretty well here in New Bedford, but again, because people are traveling to other parts of the country, there's the risk that some of it gets brought back. And if there isn't mask wearing, then you open up the possibility of very quick exponential spread.
Yeah, in Korea, because the China is kind of going through like the dust bowl we had, so all this yellow dust hits all of Asia. So they already have hundreds of masks in their house before the coronavirus broke out. Of course, they had all those other viruses over the last 10 years, so they're kind of way prepared
for it.
Yeah. So Mass Inc. did an article, and they were kind of focusing on the cities that were impacted, in South Coast to Brockton to whatever, kind of the gateway cities, and they quoted you as saying, the state did not have a plan in southeastern Massachusetts. We did this on our own. You kind of felt, I know we got hit at the tailwind of it. You kind of felt like the state didn't really give you the proper resources or information.
Yeah, I haven't seen the article, but what I was probably referring to was the nursing home. Well, referring to the COVID overflow centers that we had to establish. They had been established. COVID overflow centers had been established in Boston, Worcester, Springfield, and on the Cape. There was nothing here, and there had been no plan for it. And that's what prompted me to say, look, we have to prepare. We've got to develop a facility or facilities that would allow us to decompress St. Luke's Hospital and St. Anne's Hospital Charlton Hospital and St. Anne's over in Fall River. In the event that they receive a surge of patients. And so that's why, we started working on taking over, those two nursing homes, the one on Rockdale Avenue and the one on Acushnet Avenue in the far north end, so that we could, if we had to, allow St. Luke's in particular to decompress. And that's the way it turned out. we didn't wait for the state to take that action. We did it on our own, and those places, at least the one on Rockdale Avenue, filled up. The one on Acushnet we didn't end up needing, but it made a difference, and because we could get those people out of the hospital, also allowed us to put folks from nursing homes who were infected into another setting so that they didn't affect others in their nursing homes. So look, I mean, this isn't Monday morning quarterbacking. They asked me about some of the stuff that we had done, and we're very proud of the proactive efforts that we took very early on to ensure that people were safe here.
And so we interviewed Superintendent Tom Anderson, which I think has been a fantastic school superintendent. I think we finally got it right. Not saying that you didn't get it completely right, but we've had a lot of superintendents over the last decade, but I think he's been a fantastic choice. We talked to him about schools. So schools are still on track?
So schools are. So the plan is for a hybrid approach. And look, I mean, we have to, we're taking a hybrid approach as a way of balancing the public safety, public health interests at stake, as well as the need to get kids back to school. I mean, every kid only has one shot at third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, as the case may be. And I think, kids, suffered like everybody else in this pandemic, but in different ways. We have to do everything we can to ensure that children are not deprived of their education. And we also know that remote learning is hardly a substitute for the real thing. We need to get kids in classrooms. So we're trying to do it in as safe a way as possible. And that has meant that we're doing a combination of both distance as well as classroom learning this year until the coast is clear, right? Until we have some sort of resolution of the pandemic. Until that happens, what we'll do is we are introducing students back into the classroom gradually. So the first set of students will go back next week. Those are the high need students with special needs, students with limited English speaking capacity, students who had a tough time logging on in the spring for whatever reason. We want to get those kids plugged in. We'll see, and they're going to get plugged into classrooms where things are spaced out, where there will be mask wearing, where there will be ample ventilation, and lots of protocols about how students move around the school. If all that goes well, then we'll reintroduce the next set of kids, which will be the transitional grades, pre-K, K, and 6th and 9. They'll all come back. And then a couple of weeks after that, everybody else on a rotating basis. What we're trying to do is create enough space in the school so that students don't get too close, and teachers don't have to get too close, and to overlay all of it with a remote learning platform that allows kids to connect to their schools even when they're not there. So that's the trick, and I think the school department's been managing it very well, and they're going to take it step by step based on the public health data that we have.
So we got a question from Rhonda. What's going to happen with Halloween?
Well, I don't know if that's a way of asking me what I'm going to be for Halloween this year.
Scooby-Doo? Is it Scooby-Doo again?
Remains to be seen. I'll leave people in suspense. Yeah, I know some cities elsewhere in the country have shut down Halloween. I don't see a need for that. I mean, it's an outdoor activity. I think there's some things that we probably shouldn't do. There shouldn't be indoor Halloween parties. But, and that would fall under the same general rules about indoor gatherings, right? So those rules are already in place. I don't see a need at this point, and I'm open to somebody convincing me otherwise, but I don't see a need to shut down Halloween, especially if kids are wearing masks. They may not be the surgical mask. They might be a gorilla mask or something, but whatever, a ninja turtle mask, but it's a mask. And so if kids, we'll probably come out, it's only, it's beginning of September right now, so there's still a little ways to go. But, I don't, unless things get a lot worse between now and then, I don't foresee shutting down Halloween, shutting down trick-or-treating.
So we'll shift over to the budget. So when you had your proposed budget, the big things were one of the ladders closing and the consolidation of the downtown police station into the headquarters. And then the city council went on and did a lot of cuts, and you sent out a letter talking about your disappointment. Can you talk about some of the cuts that you're disappointed about?
Well, what we tried to do, and as I laid out in my budget address, is that we tried to address those areas that we didn't think were sustainable. The pandemic is not just a one-year event. At least the economic fallout is not a one-year event. It will reverberate over the next few years, and that means that the city will likely take in less money and not be able to afford all the things that it has been doing in the way of services over the last few years. So we knew we had to belt tighten, and it's better to belt tighten now when you can see the problem coming than waiting for the problem really to hit hard in a year or two and have our options reduced. If you wait too long, you're going to have to lay off people, right? And we didn't want to get to that point. So I proposed a budget that dealt with areas that we thought weren't sustainable, where we could reduce the number of employees and activities without laying off people, and so and without reducing services in a material way. We thought that with the police station, that New Bedford could afford to close that downtown station, in part because, as it turns out, as you look around Massachusetts, the only other city that has full-time satellite or district stations is Boston. That's it. Fall River doesn't have them. Brockton, Springfield, Worcester, they don't have district police stations. We have 3 of them. So we thought that was an area where we could reduce. Same thing with the desk officers in those district stations. Again, I just think it makes police have a higher produce more when they're out on the street as opposed to behind a desk. I thought we could reduce the number of vacancies that are equivalent to the number of desk officers we had, and then to bring the desk officers out onto the street. So that's what we did. As far as the fire engine goes, we've seen a reduction in the number of fire calls in the city over the years. We thought that's an area where we could reduce without compromising services. So, and same thing goes with the senior center in Ashley Park, just something that hadn't been used much. So these are all things that we thought we could afford to do. There were other vacancies in the budget, and I told the city council, I said, look, we still have to provide services for people, and if it turns out that we have, I made clear that in these other areas, if we reduce, we're going to materially hurt our ability to provide services that people want and deserve. So, so I was surprised at some of the cuts, right? So, and especially because I hadn't really heard much from the councilors who most sought to cut things. They filed their cuts without public notice, and they just put them on file and then acted on them. But they included things like the city's electricity bill for many of its buildings. Like, we're no different from anybody else. We've got to pay the electric bill. So now that that's cut, we have to think, okay, we've got to transfer money from somewhere else. We have to take from somewhere else just to pay the electric bill. It didn't make a lot of sense. They cut 2 positions from the health department in the middle of a pandemic. Again, I'm not so sure that holds up to common sense. They essentially eviscerated the marketing and tourism department at a time when we need to do everything we can to support small businesses in the city, where we need to bring people in to the city. And there is travel and tourism going on right now. It's mostly regional, but people aren't flying anywhere, but they are traveling. And we want people to travel to New Bedford and to spend money here. So now, especially with all the small businesses that we have hurting, so now is not the time simply to eliminate that entire department, except for 1 employee. So, and those are some examples, and there are others. The elimination of carpenters in our building and our Department of Facilities and Fleet Management. I mean, it might seem like, oh, so what's the big deal with that? The big deal with that is You have to maintain buildings, and if you're not if you don't have a carpenter in the department, in city government, then you got to go outside of city government and pay a lot more to get the work done. So a lot of it just didn't stack up. I could give you other examples. The bottom line, Mike, is it's as we work our way through this stuff, it's very important for the council and the administration to be communicating about the nitty-gritty details about the budget, because that's that kind of attention and thoughtfulness that our residents deserve. We try to spend our money, spend the city's money as we would our own. That's always been the watchword, and that takes communication, and I think it was kind of lacking while we were going through the budget this time.
Okay, so final topic. Across the country, the Black Lives Matter rallies are big. In New Bedford, it was pretty big this summer. We even had about, I think, 30 people in front of your house. You came out and talked to them. The biggest thing going on right now is Don Brisson and the Malcolm Gracia case. Is the Malcolm Gracia case closed in your eyes?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, as I've said before, I mean, that happened just as I got into office, and it was such an awful event. However you slice it, a 15-year-old kid died on a night when he was just, walking around his neighborhood. He stabbed a police officer. We know that, but nevertheless, it's just if you ask the police officers, they'd say the same thing. The whole thing is just awful. I mean, I knew Malcolm's father, Jojo Ramos. I mean, I knew him for a long time. He was a friend of mine. It's just a really, really sad situation. And, we spent a lot of time, as you will recall, Mike, back in 2012 and 13, trying to heal some wounds that had opened up as a result of the case. We brought in a facilitator from the Department of Justice, a guy named Zeke Jennings, who went on later to be a facilitator in a number of other places like Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, and with the Trayvon Martin case. And so he was a really, legitimate professional when it came to facilitating community dialogue. And we signed an action plan. We, the NAACP, the Human Relations Commission, a number of other organizations, committing ourselves to, better communicate, among other things, better communication, and more and a willingness to be, more open to dialogue with our police. The police have focused since then more on community policing, and I think that's been appropriate. It's led to a significant drop in crime in the city since then. And, at the same time, we had, a couple of years ago, a lawsuit brought by the family of Malcolm's family, which is appropriate. But what didn't happen as a result of that lawsuit was anything new that came out, right? Back in 2012, the district attorney's office said, that as tragic as it was, the actions of as the incident was, the actions of the police were justified. And since then, nothing new in the way of material evidence has been developed. And so there, to my mind, there's no reason to revisit any decisions from back then. And it's unfortunate that there's still some folks who want to simply perpetuate to go back and reopen the case. What I'd say to them is a lot happened back then, and nobody's going to say that it wasn't an awful event, but we do. I believe, as the DA reported, and as the Attorney General's office, decided not to reopen the case, that the matter, that the actions were justified. And what we need now is really for people to look at the facts of the case if they have doubts about that, and to understand that there are others have good faith differences of opinion when we all want to make our city better and more equitable and more caring all together.
Okay, I know you have to head to another meeting, so if you want to close, or we can just end it right here.
Well, as elected official, Mike, I will never turn down the opportunity to say a little bit more. So no, look, I mean, I think just going back to to some of our COVID issues that it's, we just have to stick with it. We're doing the right thing. We as a city altogether are doing the right things, and we're doing them well to keep people safe. Sometimes we have outbreaks like the ones that we just saw that are reminders that, when we do let our guard down, things can happen. And so we just have to continue to focus and support one another in lots of ways. If it's just friendly reminders or, pats on the back for doing the right thing, whatever it is, and encouraging our kids to do the same, then I think we will get through all this just fine.
Okay, so thanks for joining, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. I'd like to bring in the mayor. Usually ask him, he's available within a day that we asked to come on. I thought it was good to have you come in and explain these mini outbreaks that we've had in the city. So thanks for your time, Mayor Mitchell, and we'll see you again hopefully soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike.